Welcome to the Care Anywhere Revolution, the podcast that's redefining how and where healthcare happens. I'm Jeff McGath, and together we'll explore the groundbreaking shift from hospital-centric care to a world where healthcare meets patients wherever they are, at home, in the community, and across the continuum. Brought to you by Mona Lisa Healthcare, this show dives into the innovations, policies, and technologies like Sherpa Care EHR that are powering this transformation. So, whether you're a healthcare leader, clinician, policymaker, or innovator, join us as we unpack the future of care anywhere. So, today I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Mark Johnson. He's the president of the American Nursing Informatics Association. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while since we have seen each other, but a lot of stories from the past. We've worked together at various spots. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But hey, for the listeners who are maybe less familiar, can you tell us a little bit about ANIA and the mission and how nursing informatics is shaping modern care delivery?
Yeah, sure thing. As the national president of the American Nursing Informatics Association, it's a privilege to be here this morning. I've been a member since 2013. I joined the national board in 2017, so I'm on my second term. This is my full year as the president of the board of directors. We had our annual conference down in New Orleans back at the end of March. We had over 420 attendees, action-packed 4 days there in the great city of New Orleans. We talked about everything from patient-centered design to algorithms and how to get the right prompt for AI into things that nurses are using every day now. That technology is very much embedded, and then that's what the American Nursing Informatics is all about. Our tagline is where care and technology meet, and that's what we mean is we're nurses first and foremost. I've been a nurse for 27 years now.
Yeah.
Um, and you, as a nurse, not that we exclude anyone who's not a nurse. Absolutely, you can join the American Nursing Informatics if you're interested in the technology that we're using every day and how we're working to shift outcomes and improve patient care. So the American Nursing Informatics Association, it was two different units that came together in 2012, but the history of those two organizations, Caring and ANIA, one was West Coast, one was East Coast, District of Columbia based. Those have been around since the 80s, really. So technology and nursing at the bedside, it's nothing new. It just seems that the pace is a lot faster these days.
Yeah.
So it seems there's quite a bit of it's a tsunami of data, a tsunami of tools, tsunami of strategies out there. And our organization works to add some clarity to those that are on the front line, to give them some guideposts, allow them to um, have that seat at the table with the C-suite, and be informed of what is out there and what's actually making a difference in healthcare. We're about 3,300 members, and it's a great organization. Proud to be a part of it, and we'll be in Boston next March. Just put a plug out there for our annual conference. We'll be back
Absolutely.
in Boston in 2026.
All right. So I know one thing we were going to talk about today, I was interested in talking to you about was the administrative burden, but man, you've given me a different thought now during that intro. So in the recent show that you guys had, conference
Hmm.
in New Orleans, you mentioned that one of the topics there was um, conversations was around the prompts that people are using for AI. And, we as, technologists, we call that prompt engineering.
Hmm.
And Sherpa Care and our EHR, we have a lot of embedded AI, right? We're a newer AI native EHR platform. So we take certain design approaches around AI and how we can take clinical documentation that may be hand keyed, use that as a kind of behind the curtain uh, prompting where we're doing deeper and deeper prompts to really fill in more of the clinical documentation forms and experience. But how were there actually breakout sessions around that topic, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. Because our members have told us in survey year after year that they want more on AI. And in
Yeah,
Chicago, we had some of our keynotes focused on AI, and there was a lot of interest, a lot of buzz there. So for New Orleans, we actually had a pre-conference workshop that was the entire day with hands-on building prompts, that type of thing that we spent, and there was about 25 attendees in that pre-conference workshop where we rolled up our sleeves and we did example after example to really get that to stick with the utility and,
yeah.
and just quite frankly how easy some of that is if you've got the right terms and you're using the right prompts.
So, so Mark, are how are you seeing AI get surfaced into the systems that the hospitals, the clinics, all of your membership, they're nurses for their day jobs. Are you seeing them use AI within the tools that their hospital gives them, or are they using this as like a companion side saddle type of application?
Well, I would say right now where we are in 2025 from a bedside nurse perspective,
Yeah,
AI is not as transparent. It's not like, okay, I realize I'm using this is AI that I'm interacting with. I'm
yeah,
prompting here, or I'm doing a query. You're not seeing that as much. Where you're seeing the AI being utilized from a nursing informatics perspective is behind the scenes, those analysts and those informatics staff that are doing the working with data. And
hmm
so they've got these large databases and they're querying based on all of the information that we're collecting. You hear often from bedside nurses like, why are we repeatedly asked this particular question, or why do we continue to answer this question in different ways as we work through optimizing our flow sheets and those rows and all the information that nurses are collecting, because quite frankly nurses are the Harry Trumans. Everything starts with the nurse. And hey, we got a data point, let's have the nurse add that. So we can talk about documentation burden, how we got to where we are today. But again, to go back to the point, nurses at the bedside, they're not, it's not as transparent to them that this is a tool that's artificial intelligence or machine learning that we're using. But
yeah,
but we are constantly giving them data um, to act on. A great example that I've been working on the last year and a half with my particular health network. I'm the council chair for all 19 of our hospitals for the Practice Excellence in Nursing Informatics Council. So it's a big part-time job away from the
yeah,
bedside. In
yeah.
fact, I've got to run a 4-hour meeting on Wednesday with about 50 people as part of our monthly meeting. And one of the things we've been doing for a year and a half is optimizing care plans. And how we do it is machine learning. So traditionally, a care plan for a nurse where we would organize our care plan is like, oh, you came in with diabetes, you had DKA, I'm going to put the diabetes care plan into place. Regardless of the fact of what my labs are showing, regardless of the fact what doctor's orders are in about maybe a stroke workup or whatever, the nurse tended to put blinders on and say, hey, this is what I'm going to focus on. I know this patient has diabetes. This is going to be my
Mhm.
care plan, but it definitely doesn't reflect all of the care that the patient's doing. So what we've done is with machine learning, queue up recommendations. We call them best practice advisories. Say, hey, your patient had a lactic acid that was well above normal. Your patient has a stroke scale ordered every 4 hours. Your patient has physical therapy ordered. Your patient is getting Lovenox for anticoagulation therapy. Have all of those data points
Mhm.
actually queue something up to say you probably should add a bleeding precautions care plan. You probably should add an impaired mobility plan of care, and have that softly recommended to the nurse as they're going through their day. They can look over in their storyboard or wherever it is on that EMR and say,
Yeah.
hey, that's a great recommendation. And that's machine learning. That's that artificial intelligence looking at all of that data for that patient encounter and saying, from a nurse perspective, you really should think about adding this. And that's something that my counsel's been working on. We're in our second year of doing that. We optimize the care plans. We look at all of the triggers, those things that queue up those recommendations. So the nurse, as we're doing all of the things that we're doing, we sometimes don't stop and look at the bigger picture, especially new nurses. It helps them say, oh, I probably should have thought about that.
Yeah.
It's looking at all the data that's already been collected before the nurse even does one bit of documentation. There are all these data points that could help you, guide your care plan as a nurse, as that patient on the inpatient side has that encounter. So that's something that, and if you asked a nurse at the bedside, did you realize this is machine learning, or do you think of this as artificial intelligence? They would probably go no, because we don't put that tag on it. But that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's all of that data. We're using these tools to quickly kind of bubble those things up to make it more apparent that you really should think about this.
So I'm gonna ask a really like a fifth grade level kind of question here, Mark. These tools you're talking about, these are alongside or separate. Let's assume the hospital is an Epic hospital, the nurse is working in the hospital and they're using Epic. Are
Mhm.
you saying that these kinds of the tools that you're talking about and the machine learning that you guys are running, is that running in a companion app on the side? No, it's coming
No,
through Epic.
yeah, that's foundational in our EMR, which is Epic. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Question for you. Do you think the nurses out there, is there more skepticism or enthusiasm around AI?
I think it's a mixed bag at this
Yeah.
point. I really do. Um, because like I said, if you talk to a typical bedside nurse with say 5 to 10 years experience, and they're doing patient care day after day, um, they just want the documentation burden to be easier. We're we always feel overwhelmed with how much information, and if you show them a tool to better organize their workflow, how they're documenting things, they'll accept it and they'll embrace it if it works, if it's consistent and it makes their job easier. But if you just add one more flow sheet row and say, hey, you now have to document this every shift,
Hmm.
but we made it easy because of XYZ, I don't know if they're going to be like, oh, I'm super excited about the technology behind it. I'm super
Yeah.
excited about the fact that it made my documentation burden that it lessened my documentation burden, in other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about documentation burden, I know ANIA has a position statement out there. It's on your website, and there's a lot of very highly recognized individuals. Their names are on that paper. I've spent a little time reading it. It goes into, six different domains, but we at Mona Lisa Healthcare, obviously we're focused on the parts of the documentation we can control,
Right.
and we'll get into that, Mark. I'm interested though. So Mona Lisa Healthcare, we have the Sherpa Care EHR, and we're the unified EHR, right? We're bringing together all the different service lines in healthcare into a single EHR. So traditionally, if you're a skilled nursing facility, there is a certain set of vendors that have product for skilled nursing. If you're a home health agency, there's a completely different set of vendors that have an EHR specific to that. And I could go on,
Hmm.
service line by service line. Infusion therapies, completely different set. So our whole mantra is the unified EHR. What we're also seeing, Mark, is a lot of care happening outside the four walls of the, traditional service delivery, the hospital, the clinic. I'm curious, have you seen the informatics community respond? How have you seen them respond to this growing demand of, decentralized care like hospital at home or, remote care at home. How does that impact an organization that is so, deep into the informatics side? Is that seen as a risk? Is that seen as embracing it and we can do better? I'm just curious.
Well, first, I want to go back to what you were talking about with our position statement. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was absolutely written by the Hall of Future Saints from a
yeah,
nursing informatics
yeah.
perspective. Some really great folks and great informatics leaders there. And in our Journal of Informatics Nursing, which is we're on our going on our 10th year of a peer-reviewed journal now, and we had a peer-reviewed publication prior to that, but we've had the Journal of Informatics Nursing, and I just want to put a plug in there. A
Yeah.
lot of articles, a lot of research still being done about cognitive dissociation with so much, how nurses are overwhelmed and how that affects patient outcomes with all of this documentation. So we're continuing to see a lot of push from the academia as well as large integrated health networks that are doing a lot of research on that documentation burden and how
Hmm.
and how do we eliminate some of the things that just don't make any sense, but can free up our nurses to pay attention to the things that really matter, things that we're really paying them for. So I'll go. One of the things I've noticed, having been on the board for, gosh, this is my 8th year, is we are starting to hear more of our members ask about, well, what about post-acute? What
Yeah.
about home health? So, what about, because what happened, with the Affordable Care Act and high tech and all of these things, all of that money went to the acute care side. you know,
Hmm.
behavioral health, post-acute, home health, all of that really didn't get that cash influx like the acute care hospitals did. So a lot of that focus was there. And I understand the logic behind that because that is the anchor, that's foundational, that's where your acute care interactions take place. But I'm not in the hospital 365 days of the year. I might be in the hospital, 1 to 5 days a year max. Otherwise, everything's outside the walls of the hospital.
Hmm.
So how do we capture all of that? Um, you know, and how do we walk alongside of all the data that the consumers are already collecting about their health, whether it's their
Hmm.
sleep, whether it's their sleep apnea disturbances, their caloric intake, all of those things. How do we bring all of that together? We're starting to hear more and more of our members want to talk about that because, quite frankly, members from those organizations are starting to show up and be members and come to our conferences and want to present about that because we see the bigger picture. We realize it's not just within the confines of the hospital, it's outside. The vast majority of your care is ambulatory or home based. And we're seeing more of that home recovery care. I saw it really escalate during COVID.
Yeah.
If there was an opportunity, we had to free up those beds. I left the software world and went back to the bedside in the middle of COVID. And it was felt like going to war actually as an old army vet. I felt like I had put my boots back on and getting back out there. And we saw a lot of that really come very quickly to maturity of getting patients out of the hospital as fast as we could. A lot of stuff was shifting really quickly to that home health, home recovery, um, so that we could get patients out of the acute care and free up those beds. So to answer that question, we're seeing a lot of our members from the ANIA side saying, "Hey, let's talk about this. How do we get this to the same level as what the hospitals are having and having that, how do we work together there?" Um,
Yeah.
and then also just seeing it from my own practice of more and more opportunities to do that home-based recovery.
Mark, how many you may not have the number on the tip of your tongue, but do you have a gut feel for the ANIA membership? How many members are coming from home health, hospice, some of that, even the post-acute world, or is the membership mainly hospitalists?
I would say at this point of, let's just say we'll use 3,300 and you've got student
Yep.
membership that's, 100 or so, or maybe even a little more than that from student membership side. You've got your academia, a lot of hospital base. Of that 3,300 members, I would say 5% we're starting to see that, but it's not insignificant, and to the point where we are seeing that feedback to say, hey, we want to talk about this. This is where
Yep.
I work. This is where I live. And quite frankly, a lot of it started with the VA, where the VA tends to look at things more of a 360 perspective from our
Hmm.
veterans care.
Hmm.
They have an integrated health system, regardless of what we're trying to do over there with Oracle.
Yeah.
They have a system. They have a network. It's the largest, health system there is, really. It's because, and they have wanted to say, how can we make this work together? How can we use these tools that everybody else is using? A lot of that came out of some of the VA based members for ANIA driving some of that discussion.
Interesting. So it's a growing community, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. So, Mark, do you see any from the hospital side? Do you see any trends that are driving and feeding the post-acute and care at home movement that we're seeing? Anything changing in the way what happens the last day of discharge that you're seeing that might be helping some of that shift?
Um, I know there's, we probably haven't seen all of it yet, and with the federal budget changes that are happening, it feels so fluid right now. It
Yeah.
feels very chaotic right now. But we just have to drive off of the map that we have today. A lot of things are still driven off of rehab evaluations. Um, a lot of the documentation from a doctor's perspective of, do they need this home health? Do they need, what is it they need after they leave the hospital? Insurance companies, quite frankly, are still, all of the reimbursement is still being driven off of what the payer is going to
Yeah.
allow.
Yeah.
So it's all driven from it's a reimbursement issue. And so our case managers are very overwhelmed with making sure we've connected all the dots to, has a therapist seen them? What is their recommendation? What is the evaluation? You, you know, Having all of that together is I have a lot of respect for case managers. In other words, is they have a lot of balls in the air. And it seems to me, from my view, is it just is continuing to getting more complex what they have to navigate to get our patients out and have the right people take care of them so they don't turn around and come right back to the emergency room in 48 hours.
Yeah. I love the position you're taking there. We've got to work with the roadmap that we have, right? This feels very frenetic,
Yeah,
policy does right now. Um, but case managers, Mark, I mean, they've got documentation burden.
yeah,
when when they're when they're dealing with transitions of care and they're having to reauthorize insurance, they're having to maybe do prior auth activities around, can this even happen? Can we get the patient, a week and a half of some post-acute care at home? So when we talk about documentation burden, we're kind of looking at all the touch points for the patient receiving the care where they need it. So case managers, I would concur with you. If anything, their workloads have increased with the with all of this new optionality we have.
right.
Um, Interesting. So I want to shift topics a little bit and talk about more about your organization, Mark, and the role of nursing informatics. How do you see that role kind of shaping our future? Do you see them helping to shape some of the new care pathways? I mean, personally, Mark, I was on a call last week And I got in front of an organization. You maybe have heard about this because you work in the trenches. There's an organization that is now doing blood transfusions at home. And I
Hmm,
was
hmm.
astounded to hear that. But interested in your thoughts on ANIA and how do you guys see your role of helping shape the future and maybe just put the guidepost, like you said earlier, around some of those care activities.
Well, I think if I just want just from a historical perspective, from
Yeah.
what nursing informatics has been doing over the last, say, 15 years,
Yeah.
there was this huge ramp up to do EMR implementation. We needed boots on the ground. We needed people to build the EMR, to train people to use the EMR,
Yep.
to do all the tweaking, all the things. And we've kind of settled on that, you know. So now nursing informatics has really shifted to the fine tuning on the inpatient side, but more so, how do we get all of the data that we've collected now that we built this thing? How do we get it to make sense? It's every day I'm working. I have a manager pull me in and say, "Hey, can you look at this with me? This analyst who's not a nurse is running these reports and saying, hey, this is you're not in compliance because this particular thing isn't happening." But they're not looking at the right field. They're not pulling the right data point because they're not a
Right.
nurse. They have never done a bedside shift handoff, or they've never done a medication handoff to another nurse, or they've never repositioned a patient because of pressure injuries and documented that. They think they know what they're pulling, but they're not pulling the right field, or a discharge delay, and they're not pulling the right time because they don't understand the logistics of the doctor writes an order, I do my education, I get the patient out, I do all this documentation. So to all of those examples
Hmm.
really show that's what nursing informatics is doing that translation. We're the
Yeah.
bridge between all of this clinical data being collected versus and handing it off in a logical manner to the people who want to consume that data and make sense of it and look at it. We have to make sure, one, you're pulling the right data, you're pulling it at the right time, you're pulling it on the right patient, and many times walk them through the scenario. This is what we do. We do X, Y, Z, and if that's happening, then we do A, B, C, and making sure they know all of those data points. So having said that, as we start to transition to people spending less time in the hospital, how do we get the right data to those healthcare providers in the community who are doing
Yep.
that care? How do we get that to them? So one, they they can understand it, it's the right data, and it's delivered to them in a way that they can understand it and use it. Because many times we just give them all of these flow sheets. I mean, we're still using freaking fax machines to send 60 pages of data that I don't care about.
Yeah.
There's nothing on there, maybe two paragraphs on the 33rd page that I really wanted to know about. How do I get that to them in a way that they can consume it, it makes sense, and they can actually do something with that data? So I think that's where you're going to see the critical need for nursing informatics individuals to stand in that position to understand how the data was collected and what does it need to be used for, and provide it to the people who need it down the line. So no matter who hands it off, everybody understands what happened to that patient, why did it happen, and where do we go to next.
Mark, I want to go back to your vendor community background a little bit because when you mentioned the fax machine and there's actually two really great paragraphs on page 33 that you would like and need to know. I remember when you had a position where you actually helped inform some of the standards around CCDs, right? And clinical care, document and the whole interchange of that type of documentation. Do you see AI being able to step in and take multiple CCDs from different orgs? Let's say a patient's about to present in a post-acute environment, and being able to consume that 60 pages that may have come across as on a fax machine, summarize that to pull forward those two paragraphs at the end?
Oh,
Curious?
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you can that, and that's where AI today
yeah,
really excels, is taking these large language databases,
mm,
whether it's a library or a patient's record, and looking for those things, OCR or discrete data or whatever,
yeah,
and being able
yeah,
to synthesize those, all of those data points and all of that vomit of
yeah,
data so that
yeah,
it makes sense. I think that's a huge benefit to where AI is today, and that's where you see the most utilization. We're not doing that with our inbound data, to my knowledge. But definitely something that folks are looking at.
yeah.
Um, it is what that is a huge benefit of where we are today with AI, is being able to take all of that, those large language databases, and synthesize those things down so that it
Yep.
makes sense with reference points and links to go back to it if you want to look at it.
Absolutely. You need to have the citations built in, right?
Right,
So here's your that is something that we're focused on at Mona Lisa, and it's almost like here's your read in, right? Hey, just new patients landed on my census, but here's a read in. Yes, I'm not taking away any of the documentation that came from prior visits. I'm just helping you summarize and give you a little more uh, targeted surface map here to really don't miss this piece, right?
right.
Here are some important summary items around a patient. Really, really interesting to hear you say that. I do think if I wanted to kind of get into and have a little fun here at the end and just kind of ask you your opinion of one or two, I don't know, you might have three predictions around, healthcare, where we see things going, the technology, the informatics side. I obviously lean into the AI tremendously. And one prediction, that I have is the health information exchanges, the HIEs of the world that have always maybe struggled a little bit for their um, being able to, keep themselves funded without the government money coming in. I actually see those data sets becoming extremely valuable for that kind of workflow and use case we just talked about. But being able to take that massive amount of data that they have and with the proper consent models in place, be able to leverage that for any care I receive as a patient, in the future, just knowing that I've got really good, um, there's an AI-based system that is informing the clinician that's about to care for me. And Mark, it may even branch out and include genomics data, right?
Right. Hmm.
And get down to some pharmacogenomic levels to say, hey, this patient's on lisinopril and their body doesn't synthesize that because they have this gene mutation, right? I'm not the doctor, but that helps get that surfaced up for possibly a medication switch. But
Right.
that's
And
one of my predictions. Do you have any fun ones that you'd like to share?
no, I would just on that pharmacogenetics with
Yeah.
specialized medicine,
Yep.
you're definitely seeing that more. That we're very, it's early in maturity.
Hmm.
We have the capability, that once we've mapped out the gene sequence and done all of the things that we've done there, and people are starting to volunteer their data and all of those things, and
Yep.
regardless of what happened with 23 and Me and all of those things,
Yeah.
we see people embracing that. It's not science fiction, and people want that specialized medicine because we're inundated with medications, and having the awareness that my body might not metabolize that particular medication because of a genetic predisposition. I think all patients are embracing that. They understand that this is really overdue, and now that we've got the technology to do that, I think you're going to see more patients embracing that.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always the privacy concerns and the, pharmaceutical company benefit and all of those things that go along with that. But that is a great place for nursing informatics to fit in is, okay, you're going to start down a path for chemotherapy. We've got you staged at a particular type of cancer. Here are your options. We're going to do some genetic testing. Let's walk through this. Let me come beside you at the elbow and kind of walk through this and just be sort of a genetic counselor and give that clinical perspective on, here's your roadmap, here's the options available for your chemotherapy journey. I think you're going to see a lot of nursing informatics embrace those roles.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm interested in and I'm working with some folks on is ambient listening from a nursing perspective. And this really is sort of a holy grail because let's be honest, a doctor comes in for 5 to 10 minutes max on say a 12-hour shift from a nursing perspective, you're in the hospital. It's pretty easy for me to listen for 5 minutes because you're going to go down a particular pathway.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more difficult to capture 12 hours of nursing care. I helped you open your milk. I walked you to the bathroom. I placed 2 IVs. I gave you these 3 antibiotics. You had this, all of these things that are
Right.
happening. That's why the documentation burden is so real, is because we're trying to capture all of these things. Where I would like to see us go is start to be able to capture some of that stuff ambiently. You know,
Yep.
right now I just want a handheld so I don't have to pull the damn computer into the room or use the computer in the room on the other side of the bed. I want a handheld so I could give a Tylenol or I could document 300 cc's of urine, before I have to walk out of the door, go into the hallway, get hit by 6 family members and hit by a truck and forget that you just peed 300 and I've got you on strict INOs. Being able to capture
Yep.
just some
Yeah.
of that, so that I can say 300 cc's to the scanner or the sensor or whatever,
Right.
and
Right.
it documents that for me. It's just data points. The soft skill stuff of holding your hand while a doctor takes a port out of your chest at the bedside, we're never going to replace that with a robot. So you're always going to have nurses interacting with patients on the acute care side and outside of the walls of the hospital. You're always going to have nurses who can look at the human side of it, not just all these data points. So that's not going to go away. But how do we capture those little things they're doing
Yeah.
time after time after time when they go in? That's where I want to go, is from a term, if we're looking at documentation burden, is have this stuff captured automatically so that I don't have
Yeah.
to remember to do it. Make it easy for us.
Man, Mark, it's as a technologist, I can absolutely guarantee you that's a futures prediction that I'm already seeing.
Yeah.
We have ambient AI. We call it Lisa. It is in a handheld. It's not on the computer. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen an Oasis start a care form. If you print it, it's about 75 pages long.
Yeah.
We've got ambient AI that will listen to a patient assessment, and those are typically hour and a half long.
Hmm.
And we're populating those kinds of forms. You're bringing up a completely different battlefield, right? It's just the daily. It's in the hospital, and you're absolutely right. The nurse is in and out of the room so many times throughout the day that having that type of ambient AI that can just remind you, hey, this and this and this and this happened today with this patient.
Right.
Um, Fascinating. Uh, I believe maybe we can have a future conversation one day, Mark. I think we could drill in and talk about ambient um, and some of the interesting use cases and workflows that are out there and how we take historical data, we combine that with, intake forms with ambient AI to even get to the point where the ambient AI, yeah, it's listening, but then there's the AI part where it's coming in and suggesting treatment goals. Here's some goals here, maybe more on the therapy side than the nursing side, but fascinating stuff, Mark. Hey, before I let you go today, I wanted to get this in. Um, what's one message that you think you would like technologists, vendors, that are out here trying to build the solutions that you guys really need, what's the one thing that we need to be thinking about that we could be doing to further develop the field and make make patient care better?
Wow. We could talk all day about that, but the one takeaway, it's the
A
simple
top
thing.
one, top of mind for you.
It's keeping it simple and making it easy.
Okay.
Because I'll be honest with you, like I said, I've been a nurse for 27 years, and the acuity of the patients that we see today, not just obese patients, but how sick they are, and the funding issues and all of the things that we're having to deal with. It's very complicated. It's
Yeah.
frustrating. It can be overwhelming. So keep the documentation simple for me to interact with it, and simple for me to get the information I need. Those are the things. It's got to be at my fingertips, whether it's a handheld, whether it's audio cues, whatever it is. Make it simple because we're overwhelmed, and it just putting all those pieces together. Um, it can be. I work with younger nurses every day. I've been a nurse longer than they've been alive, and trying to guide them through what should I do next? Well, how would you respond to the doctor? They all of these things we need to make it easy, give them the data to support what they already know, and where what they can see with this patient.
Yeah.
They're starting they already they're walking. Help them run. It's like, have all this data here so they don't have to go look for it. Make it transparent. That's really what I work for every day. Is don't give me six different ways to document the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
One and done.
One and done. Keep it simple. All right. So, Mark, I can't thank you enough for joining today. Where can people find out more information about ANIA? How do they get in touch with you or the organization? You want to give us a little
Yeah,
plug there?
sure. President at ani.org. And we have a great website with the online library of thousands of hours of nursing continuing professional development at ANIA.org, ANIA.org. Like I said, we have monthly webinars. We have an annual conference coming up. We just became an affiliate member of the American Nurse Association.
I saw that.
A lot of things happening. Got some great folks on our board. Really excited about where things are going. I'm just happy I'll be a lifetime member, and I get to come to every conference for free for here on out. So they won't get rid of me anytime soon when I roll off and become dead president society. So um, I will give you
Cool
a
stuff.
funny anecdote about machine learning from a nursing
Sure.
perspective this week. We have a great coworker, and she's her name is Marge, and she's Marge in charge is what we call her all the time, even though she's never the charge nurse, because that's just not what she wants to do. She's got a very dry sense of humor, a little bit sarcastic, been a nurse for a
Yeah.
long time. And we just started calling her Marge in charge. We had these hats made and whatever, just to lift the spirits,
Yeah.
because we do whatever we have to do
Yeah.
to laugh and bring some levity to it. And I said, we need to get Chat GTP to write a sitcom about Margin Charge. And I used two simple prompts, write a sitcom about a disgruntled nurse who likes to travel, has a dry, sarcastic sense of humor. I took a picture with her wearing a hat that said in charge. And I said, create an opening sequence on that. Those are the two prompts I used. In 10 seconds, Chat GPT wrote out a theme song, wrote out supporting characters, wrote out episodes. I printed this out, put it in a notebook. My wife's a school teacher. I got plenty of supplies. And these nurses have been hurting themselves reading these episodes. And I'm telling you, Jeff, it spit it out in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's a funny little way to use machine learning, chat GPT, artificial intelligence. But those little things are opening the eyes of those nurses to say, wow, this is really powerful stuff, that it can write this out and take all of that language just on those two simple prompts to write a sitcom about this nurse. And it had like real life stuff that, we were laughing at because we've seen it. So
Yeah.
it knows what a nurse does in the hospital. It has that awareness based on these, large language models that it's looking at. But being able to do that and show them a funny exercise around that really opened up some eyes. And it's like nurses are just like, a lot of them are very naive about this. But as we move forward and we start to bring these tools and you say, hey, this is really AI that's doing this, they're going to embrace that. But, right
Yeah.
now it's sort of a novelty. They're like, wow, that's crazy how it did that. And being able to show them how easy it was. Like, look, you can type whatever you want in this prompt and it's going to spit out something that actually makes sense because it's been built very well. It understands what's going on.
Yeah.
So that
We
was a
we
funny
live in
thing.
amazing times, Mark. And
Yes.
I look at the people like you and me that are older, we've been in the field for so long. We've got to make sure that we harness this amazing time that we live in and this power and get it directed in the right directions to solve those problems that we've been trying to solve for 20 years. And I think we've got the tools to do it now.
Yeah, it's absolutely still a Tower of Babel out
Yeah.
there. And you know, we're translating as best we can and
Yeah.
treading water. And at the end of the day, you hope that your patient's safe, your patient's comfortable, your patient's on a healing journey. And quite frankly, that's why I like working at the bedside because I
Yeah.
get that immediate feedback, even as chaotic and as frustrating and as messy as it is. It's still something I enjoy of trying to make a difference to folks in their lives and families.
Yeah. Mark, it was great to have you today.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Um,
man.
Look forward to a next conversation with you, running into you at the next trade show. Tell your wife hello.
I will.
And
Same to you, Jeff. You and
yep,
Gina.
yep, yep. Thanks a lot, man. We'll see you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks for joining us on Revolutionizing Care. Be sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and catch our next episode. See you next time.